stability control off. Real men do that. There you go. There you go. Hey, I'm back. Got interrupted on my first half of the video over here. Alright, the topic is types of power adders for your vehicle. The good and the bad and the ugly. And I got a lot of flack before on this when I posted the video that I put for modding your engine on one of my other YouTube. I'll link it on down below. And the Dodge community wasn't too bad, but when I posted to my other communities that I'm affiliated with, they hammered me half to death on there, saying I don't know what I'm talking about, that I'm full of BS, you know, superchargers are great, I run this, I run that, I got this amount of power from that stock engine, I never had any problems. Okay, so what? I mean, maybe you're lucky, maybe you're not attuned, maybe you're in the right environment for that particular setup. I don't know. Maybe you have a nice worn out engine that just could handle it. Who knows? But I've run a pro-charged 18 pounds on a stroked out Chevy small block, LT1 to be exact, on a 4th gen Firebird for years. And even before that, I had the older style, I think it's Dynamax, Dynapack, I don't know what it was. It was like a belt-driven supercharger. It was super quiet, it was stealthy. That was my introduction to superchargers. I bought that used, and it was a quiet-ass supercharger. It only made about 6-7 pounds of boost. It wasn't that complicated. I had no intercooler on there. I'll see if I can post some pictures of it as I'm talking on this. But that's how I got started, and I learned the hard way. And I wish I had somebody, and this is before YouTube and before this was prevalent and people posting videos about this, and there was more knowledge out there, all the sounding boards that you can talk to and to people and all that kind of stuff. People really weren't running that type of stuff back then. So I wish that somebody, so when you say to me that I don't know what I'm talking about, I'm not an expert. I never said I was an expert, but I do have 10 plus years, no, actually more than that, probably almost 16, 17 years worth of supercharging knowledge, or had systems like that, or built systems like that, or run systems like that. And this is when supercharging, when they would sell the kit, and they would give you, instead of what they give you now, they give you a supercharger in a box, some tubing that sort of fits your car, and an FMU. And I'm pretty sure some of you older guys know what the hell I'm talking about with an FMU. You know, basically they just tap into the fuel rail, and every time it sees boost, it just blocks off the amount of fuel that's going to the rail and increases the pressure on stock injectors to give you that enrichment. So there was no tuning involved in that. You just put it on, hope for the best, and then the engine blew up. I got 10,000 miles out of an engine with a car with 23,000 miles on it. So I mean, it just shows you how far things have gone. Then they came out with the booster pumps, which are garbage. I mean, they have their niche as far as for those types of setups, but they're noisy, they're a pain in the ass, they're in line with the fuel, they're not solving the problem in the back of the tank with your stock fuel pump, because most of the guys didn't upgrade their rear pump. They just put a booster pump with the FMU and that's it, and kaboom, basically. So power adders, there's a couple of different types of the popular types. There's, of course, the superchargers. They come in two variants: the ProChargers type of setup, or the Roots, or the Whipples, you know, the types they use for the Challengers, for the Hellcats and the ZR1s. I'm not going to get into the big giant Roots superchargers, because that's really that's another topic, because most guys don't run that on these modern cars. And most guys just don't run them on the cars, and it's more of the ProCharger type of setup, turbo and all that kind of stuff. Then you run into the turbo setups, then you run into the nitrous setups. Now, let's back up to the supercharger setups. Pros and cons of that. Pros, you can make a lot of horsepower. Cons, you can break a lot of stuff. From my experience with the ProCharger setup on my car, I've gone through different variants of engines and types of setups on the ProCharger to make it work correctly. When I bought the kit back in who knows when, it was a decent kit. It wasn't bad, but it was really made for a stock engine per se. It was running. It's a P1SC, which is a self-contained unit. I later upgraded the head unit on that. That was good for maybe like six something to the wheels, maybe. You know, like on a stock engine, maybe 550. You know, on a stock engine, completely stock engine. I mean, they would sell it to you with, you know, without even putting headers on it or nothing, which is ridiculous because the motor didn't last very long. It just didn't work right, and it was garbage. As far as the kit wasn't garbage, but the engine just couldn't handle it. And what I mean by that is that before you even think about adding a power adder, nitrous, turbo, supercharger, you got to understand physics and fundamentals of an engine. Okay, back in the day, I'd say before the early 90s, small block Chevys and Fords, their engines, the older generation of engines, were built differently. And what I mean by differently, the bearing clearances and what you can get away with was a little bit different. They tended to hold up to the power a little bit more, within the 500 to 600 range, reliably. But the modern engines that you see now, while are extremely good, don't get me wrong, high flow heads, everything, I mean, just fantastic. But you got to remember that the manufacturers don't even think about supercharging or any kind of power adder. They are focused in on efficiency. Okay, so that means that you have tighter bearing clearances, you have tighter piston ring gap, tighter piston to the wall clearances. Okay, that is for emissions, that is for fuel efficiency, that is for a better running engine, basically a smoother running engine. So they're not designed to handle the thermal capacities of what a supercharger turbocharger will put into that engine and the amount of pressures that it's going to see. Head gaskets, all that kind of stuff are not designed to do that. So you're on borrowed time. So if for anybody that's thinking about a power adder, as far as supercharger turbocharger, on a stock engine, you're really limited to maybe 4.5 pounds, maybe 6 pounds of boost. But 4.5 pounds is really kind of like the okayness of that. And supercharger engines have their pros and cons. The ProCharger, Paxton, all those types are really belt-driven turbos. Essentially a linear-driven turbo off of a crank. You have different pulleys or ratios to spin it for whatever RPMs you want to match the engine in, and the RPM range you want to be in, and all that kind of stuff. The downfall of those types of setups is that there's a couple things. There's a lot of belt load on the crank snout. So for engines that don't have a steel crank or are a steel crank or a keyweight crank, all that kind of stuff, I've seen where it just snaps the snout right off, especially if you're running high boost or whatever like that. And what most people don't talk about is that, you know, when you start getting into the higher boost levels of these type of setups, especially the supercharger setups, is what destructive forces are happening within your engine, besides, you know, the pounding of power and all that kind of stuff, that most people don't talk about. They talk about broken ringlands, pistons, all that kind of stuff, and then they say, oh, well, your motor's not going to last very long. But there's many factors to that. Example number one, crank load clearance. You gotta remember, you got a big supercharger. It takes a lot of horsepower spinning over here or over there, or wherever you put it on your car, right? It is creating a load on that lower pulley, on that crank. That is, which was never designed to have that side load onto it, okay? So even in motors I've taken apart, they've had problems. When you take out the crank, you're looking at the bearings and you're speccing everything out, besides all the other broken parts on there, you notice a lot of crank walk. And that means with the thrust bearings going back and forth in the crank, and also the side loads on the snout of the crank, on the front bearings of the crank. So that's one thing that you got to consider too when building a supercharged, turbocharged, not so much turbocharged engine, but it's the crank load of what your bearing clearance is going to be set up, and you have to pre-think of how you're going to be using the engine. That's just one of many aspects of an engine that people don't think about. They just think about, oh, throw a ton of horsepower on it, okay, it should last, whatever it is. It's just that, and then they wonder why it doesn't last. Then you have like the Whipple or the positive displacement type of blowers on there, which are fantastic. They, the one thing bad about the ProChargers is that they don't make low-end boost or low-end power, as far as they're very linear, which is a kind of a good thing too, because it's not hammering the engine at low RPM. You basically, if you're going to throw a lot of boost at an engine, you want to hit it at a higher RPM where it stays less at top dead center and it's moving around on there. It seems to have a less stress load on the engine, much less stress load. But you lose all torque on there. So the Whipples come in, like the Hellcats, the ZR1s, the Chevy products, all that kind of stuff. They use, the positive displacement type of blower. It's fantastic. It gives you a lot of low end power. It's very compact the way it's mounted in the car. It sits in between the intake manifold. Everything's intake manifold. Everything sits in the middle of the engine, which is perfect for layout. Now, also, it's liquid cooled. You can have a liquid cooled ProCharger, all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother topic of intercoolers and all that kind of stuff. I'll get into that if you want later on down the line. I'm not going to get into it now. They are fantastic, but most of those units cannot support high application engines. 700 horsepower is really usually the max that you can probably get out. A lot of guys take those blowers off and go with a ProCharger because it just makes more power. It just can flow more air. The Demon did that with a bigger unit. The new Chevys came out, the bigger unit also on there, because the other ones just didn't have the power capacity to do that. That's just an inherent, you only move so much air flow through the case of the thing. You can spin them higher, but then you put them out of their peak efficiency mode, and then you put stress on the bearings, all that kind of stuff and everything. Then you have your turbo variants. To me, I think turbos are the most efficient setup out there as far as making power, but they're the most complicated about making power. These days, you have a lot of options. You have all the electronics that go with it. You can do boost by gear, how much boost comes in, all that kind of stuff. It's fantastic, but the complexity and the cost is astronomical. And if you don't do your own work, it's even more money. So that's a big factor. If I had it my way, I probably would have went with turbo to begin with. Well, no, because I was kind of a beginner at that, so that's kind of hard to say. I mean, looking back now, yes, I would have done turbo, but I didn't have the knowledge then, so I probably would have went through a lot more motors and blown up a lot more shit with that. If you have an automatic or a stick car, that makes it even more complicated to tune. Now, the easiest way to make power, in my book, is nitrous. It's not NOS. It's not all those fucking weird Fast and Furious words. Why can't you guys come up with a better way to say that? NOS. I mean, I could go on days for that. Call it something cool, like Smurf Juice, like the old guys, or Sneaky Pete, or the Blue Velvet. I don't know. Call it something cool instead of stupid. Is that NOS? And most people don't even know what the hell they're talking about half the time. But nitrous used to be a dirty word, because back in the day when we used to spray nitrous on our cars, and this is through a carbureted setup and all that kind of stuff, you would have a plate, some solenoids, a bottle, usually just bolt it to the back seat of the car, and just manually blow torch it or whatever, just, there's no, and run a junkyard motor with 300 shot of nitrous on there, and with a button you would hold in your hand or onto the shifter and hit the button on there. Now you got progressive systems. You got, it comes in at any RPM, how much you want it, all the timers, all that kind of stuff, which makes them, I think, a pretty, I mean, it's not like a turbo and it's not like a supercharger. It's like a mystery meat, or like that that I call it a sneaky Pete type of thing, because you can make a ton of power with nitrous. You know, it's not as cool looking. You can hide it. You can be stealthy about it, and it gets the job done. No way around it. It is basically a chemical supercharger on your motor. It's just the downfall of that is that you got to fill the bottle all the time, and it's illegal in most states. So you get caught with it. You know, I don't know what they do to you, but again, that to me is, I think, is the unsung hero of a lot of people that run stuff. You know, they always, you know, go with the big turbos and all that kind of stuff, but I've seen guys with, you know, basic nitrous kits kick some ass on the street, and you would never know it in a sleeper type of car, you know. But it's crazy. So, in conclusion, know what you're getting into, and enjoy the power making and learn some stuff. But don't waste your money on certain things that you know is going to cost you twice fold in the long run. I'll try to post some pictures of some of my builds and throughout the video, and to show you the broken parts and what the superchargers can do to even $1,000 set of pistons. You lose a fuel pump or so. But yeah, and then on top of that, as again, you know, I don't know. Let me know what you think. Talk to you later. Bye.